So Dave, what is sin, and are there different types of sin?
You could come at this from a few different angles. So one way to understand sin is an offense against God and his law. So anything that is contrary to the law of God. So that can sound very legalistic, because it sets up God as God has his law, we violate the law, now we get punished, etc. But that is indeed an important way to understand sin. You could also look at sin as any, thought, word, deed against charity. So therefore, sin becomes a contradiction of love. Love of God and love of neighbor. So I think both of those are good and both of those are important.
Yeah.
So you have an offense against God and his law, and you have a failure to love God or our neighbor.
So that, and when you say failure to love, that reminds me of what has been circulating a lot recently, at least in my internet algorithm regarding Christianity, Catholicism, with the definition of sin as being, or the etymology of sin as being an archery term. So we were just talking about this before we started recording, and as I was prepping for the interview, I was reading an article online, and the author was trying to make a case that it's actually not an archery term, because you're always hearing this, sin, it's an old archery term. So I think perhaps there's a confusion in that sin, the English word sin was used to translate a Greek and a Hebrew word from both the New Testament and the Old Testament, respectively, and that those words, and again, I'm paraphrasing here, and I haven't really done the research for myself. Those words were never actually used in the context of archery. Sure, they may have meant that. So, like in the context of archery, you would miss the mark. That's what people are saying. Sin is to miss the mark. So these Greek and Hebrew terms were referring to missing something, but again, perhaps were never used in a. The author of this article couldn't find a context in which they were used in an archery context. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. I use the term failure. Failures can be our fault or not, right? So we can fail at something and we tried our best and we just didn't succeed. Or we can fail and it's very much our own doing. So I think sin here, when I mean failure, I mean the kind of failure that's very much our own doing. So in that sense, maybe you could rephrase it. It's a refusal to love God and neighbor, or a rejection of God and neighbor.
Because as we were discussing, an archer who's trying to hit a target, he's trying to do the best he can to hit the center of the target.
Right.
And
that's not what sin is.
When he misses, it's an accident. He's not trying to miss. Sin is very intentional. Right?
It has to be in order to be sin. So if it doesn't include knowledge and freedom, free choice, then it's not sin in itself.
Yeah.
It might be evil doing, but it's not necessarily sin in the sense of a person is culpable for having committed such a thing. Of course, this gets into a whole lot of tricky areas that I have my own very strong opinions about, because one of the things that happens today is that people try to say, well, relatively nobody has the requisite knowledge to commit a mortal sin or a grave sin, or nobody is, to what degree is anybody really free? How do we know all the things that are working on us psychologically, et cetera, et cetera? So what winds up happening is that, like, because of contemporary psychologizing of sin, I think what winds up happening is everybody gets exonerated, because on some level, nobody really knew sufficiently, or nobody really chose freely enough. So, like, it's very convenient. And I think everybody who thinks on it harder knows that they're fooling themselves if they take that kind of slant. But, like, the fact of the matter is that's often used, and that's a way in which people often justify their acts not being so bad, right? I didn't know. What does it really mean to not know any better? Yeah, like, come on. Like, and that's a really great question. You might be able to talk about that in one regard with regards to a small child, but another regard to, like, a living, breathing, active adult, living in the world. I mean, who has any semblance of right and wrong at all. Because then how do you start claiming that you understand right and wrong in any degree? Why do you know it's not okay to harm or physically harm your neighbor, but somehow you think it's perfectly fine to sleep with your neighbor's wife? There's a sort of a bizarre sort of thing there. So so you get I think selective ignorance.
Yeah.
So,
it's almost like we form our own conscience and follow that conscience instead of actually listening to the Lord of conscience.
right. Or even in the formation of conscience, we like to pick and choose because the human heart is a very interesting thing, and we will find an excuse if we can to do the thing we want to do and somehow salve our conscience about it.
Yeah.
We're very, very good at that. So I think I'm speaking for myself. We are very good at that.
Yeah.
So, and then it takes a little bit of time, but eventually I think that facade kind of falls away, and then we're left with the reality of the choice and that we really did know better. And also too, there's a certain degree where ignorance of the law is not an excuse for not keeping it. I mean, if you try to explain to the cop that stops you that you didn't know what the speed limit was, the fact that you didn't know the speed limit is part of your fault, right? So you'd have to be invincibly ignorant to begin with, which means that you not only did not know, but could not have known and should not have known, right. Which, how many people are actually in that boat? And that's one of those other things where it's okay, well, this is interesting because when it comes down to everything I do in my life, I've got to check the internet to find out what the best and right answer is, right? But when it comes down to whether or not this is a serious sin, I kind of avoid that internet search because I don't really want to know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, you get my drift.
Absolutely.
So I think that there's an element here of personal responsibility that is lost in our culture. And that's why there's a loss of a sense of sin on a certain level because people don't really think they're doing anything all that bad.